At 9:22 local time on a Tuesday morning in the central Gulf of Oman, 94 nautical miles southeast of Bandar Abbas, the ceasefire that Iran had formally agreed to 48 hours earlier was already over. The USS Carl Vinson's SPY-6 radar picked up the first contacts at 9:22 and 14 seconds. Not a few. Not a probing attack. 194 contacts simultaneously across 4 separate bearings. Shahad, one-way attack drones climbing from coastal launch positions along Iran's southern littoral, accelerating south toward the carrier strike group on trajectories that left no room for interpretation. Iran had signed a cessation agreement at 11 o'clock the previous Sunday morning. American and coalition officials had confirmed receipt. The ceasefire had been publicly announced by 3 separate governments. Intelligence analysts watching Iranian military signal traffic in the hours that followed had assessed compliance as holding. What the SPY-6 was now painting across its tactical display was not compliance. It was the largest single coordinated drone and missile attack Iran had launched against a US Navy formation in the entire duration of the conflict. And behind it, invisible for now, was the reason Iran had waited until this specific morning to break the agreement they had just signed. In the Carl Vinson's Combat Information Center, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb had been the watch officer for 47 minutes. What no one in the Combat Information Center said out loud was that the scale alone was not the most alarming part. It was the coordination. Drone swarms were not new. Iran had used them before, and every engagement followed a familiar pattern. Scattered launch timing, inconsistent altitude bands, and loosely correlated approach vectors designed to overwhelm radar processing rather than defeat it tactically. What appeared on the SPY-6 display at 9:22 was different in a way that was not immediately quantifiable, but instinctively understood by every officer looking at it. The contacts were not random. They were structured. Every bearing line had spacing symmetry. Every altitude band was stacked in evenly distributed layers, like the system had been generated from a single geometric model, rather than a dozens of independent launch sites. Even the arrival timing suggested a synchronized release window across multiple coastal sectors rather than staggered autonomous launches. That level of coordination required one of 2 things. Either Iran had achieved a level of real-time battlefield networking that exceeded anything previously observed in the conflict, or the swarm had been pre-programmed as a single distributed strike package long before launch. Lieutenant Commander Webb leaned closer to the tactical display as additional data streamed in. The system was still resolving new contacts every second, but something subtle was becoming visible beneath the chaos, a pattern in the density distribution. The swarm was not expanding outward like a natural saturation attack, it was compressing inward toward a single geometric convergence corridor. Track behavior analysis update, the tactical data system announced automatically. Probability of coordinated multi-axis terminal convergence, 78%. Webb did not respond immediately. 78% in isolation meant uncertainty, but in context, in the middle of a live 194 contact engagement, it meant something closer to inevitability. He finally spoke into the CIC circuit. EW, confirm any structured formation behavior in the inbound picture. Lieutenant Commander Adrienne Kessler did not look up from her console. Her passive emissions panel had already been running independent correlation analysis since the first contact appeared. What she saw there was even more concerning than the radar picture. Each drone cluster was emitting identical timing signatures on their low-grade command uplinks. Not continuous transmission, burst synchronization. Microsecond-aligned data packets that suggested centralized timing control across all 4 bearings. That meant the swarm was not being flown, it was being executed. Kessler keyed her circuit. They're not navigating independently, she said. They're executing a single preloaded strike sequence, time-synced, multi-vector convergence architecture. There was a brief silence in CIC that lasted less than 2 seconds, but felt significantly longer to everyone present. Webb understood the implication immediately. If the swarm was a synchronized execution package, then its purpose was not simply to overwhelm defenses, it was to shape them. Every drone being destroyed by SM-2 interceptors was not reducing the threat in isolation. It was feeding data back into the system, refining the engagement picture, tightening the remaining vectors, and forcing the Aegis system to commit interceptors along predictable arcs, which meant the real strike geometry was not what they were shooting at. It was what they were being positioned away from. At 9:23, the first escort destroyer reported SM-2 expenditure thresholds approaching 40% in the northern engagement sector. At 9:24, the SPY-6 system recalculated threat weighting priorities twice in under 60 seconds. At 9:25, Webb noticed something that changed the tone of the entire CIC. All remaining unengaged drone contacts had begun adjusting their approach vectors by identical fractions of degree, not reacting, aligning as if the swarm itself had just completed a hidden phase transition and was now entering its final configuration state. And somewhere behind that structure, still invisible, still unclassified, still outside radar resolution limits, the system was waiting for a trigger condition. The drone swarm was not the attack, it was the countdown. In 37 days of operations in the Gulf of Oman and the Northern Arabian Sea, he had managed 19 separate engagements. He had seen swarms before. He had never seen 194 contacts on 4 simultaneous bearings. He had the ship at general quarters in 11 seconds. The political context of what was happening above the waterline was already clear to every senior officer in the strike group. Iran had agreed to terms because they had no choice. 40 days of systematic degradation of their coastal defense network, their naval command infrastructure, their ballistic missile inventory, and their air defense grid had left them with a narrowing set of operational options and a leadership structure under enormous pressure. The ceasefire had not been a genuine strategic shift. It had been a pause designed to give Iranian forces time to redistribute surviving assets, reconsolidate launch positions, and prepare one final offensive before the remaining strike capabilities they had been holding in reserve were located and eliminated. The pause had lasted 48 hours. What they had been holding in reserve was now in the air. The drone swarm crossed into engagement range at 9:27 on the northern bearing. 62 contacts. The escort destroyers, USS Winston Churchill and USS Farragut, began working through the wave with disciplined intercept sequencing, 1 SM-2 per contact, the Aegis system cycling solutions with the efficiency of a crew that had run this exact engagement architecture across weeks of continuous operations. Contacts began disappearing from the tactical display. The magazine count dropped. But what nobody in the formation had time to look for, because managing 62 simultaneous contacts on the northern bearing alone consumed every available focus, was what Lieutenant Commander Adrienne Kessler had already seen on her passive sensor display 31 seconds into the engagement. Kessler had been the electronic warfare officer on the Carl Vinson since the conflict's second week. In that time, she had developed a specific discipline. Whenever a large drone swarm appeared on radar, she stopped watching the radar. She watched her emissions collection panel instead, because the drones were never just drones. What she saw at 9:27 and 41 seconds confirmed everything she had been concerned about since the ceasefire was announced. The 194 drone contacts were not flying arbitrary approach vectors. They were flying a precisely calculated 3-dimensional geometric formation. 4 waves at staggered altitudes and bearings arranged to create a consolidated radar return mass that functioned as a moving screen across the SPY-6's tracking picture. A screen with a calculable shadow, and in that shadow, flying at ballistic trajectory altitudes that placed them entirely behind the drone formation's radar return envelope until the swarm crossed inside a specific range threshold were 8 Khorramshahr, 4 ballistic missiles, Iran's most capable warhead, each one carrying a maneuvering re-entry vehicle that could execute terminal corrections inside the final 40 seconds of flight. 8 missiles, hidden behind 194 drones, timed to clear the radar horizon with the strike group's escort magazines already deeply committed. The geometry was not accidental. Iran had spent 37 days watching how American carriers defended themselves. They had measured intercept rates. They had counted magazine cycles. They had calculated the precise drone count needed to drive the escort destroyers below a specific interceptor threshold before the ballistic contacts appeared. 194 was not a round number. It was a calculated number. The number of drones required to consume enough interceptors that 8 ballistic missiles arriving simultaneously from behind the swarm became a mathematically viable saturation scenario. Then the situation got worse. The second drone wave hit the eastern bearing at 9:29. Another 60 contacts. The formation was now managing simultaneous engagements on 2 bearings, while the Aegis computers projected the incoming third and fourth waves on the southern and western vectors. The magazine count on both escort destroyers was declining at a rate that every tactical action officer in the formation was tracking in real time. The math was not comfortable. Kessler did not report what she had found through the standard circuit sequence. There was no time for that. She made a decision that nobody above her had authorized. She began transmitting a focused jamming signal on the Khorramshahr's ground station correction frequency. The frequency Iranian ballistic missiles had used throughout the conflict to receive real-time terminal guidance updates from shore-based control nodes. She had identified it during the third week of operations and had been monitoring it continuously since. She began jamming it at 9:28 and 14 seconds before the missiles were visible on radar, before any intercept solution existed, before anyone else in the formation knew the missiles were there. The third wave entered on the southern bearing at 9:31, 38 contacts. The western wave appeared 18 seconds later. 34 contacts. 194 contacts now running simultaneously across 4 bearings. Both escort destroyers were executing intercept sequences at maximum tempo. The failsafe CIWS mounts on both ships and on the Carl Vinson itself were active and tracking. The tactical display was a landscape of overlapping solutions and debris signatures. At 9:33, 8 new contacts appeared on the SPY-6 simultaneously. Ballistic, descending, terminal phase. The Aegis system classified all 8 in under 2 seconds and began building intercept solutions. 8 simultaneous ballistic contacts at compressed range, materializing behind an active 4-bearing drone engagement with both escort magazines already substantially committed, was the worst possible scenario the strike group's defensive architecture had been designed around. The fire control solutions were not clean. The radar picture was cluttered with debris returns from hundreds of destroyed drones, and the ballistic contacts were already executing their terminal correction sequences. Or attempting to. Kessler had been jamming the correction frequency for 4 minutes and 59 seconds. The ground stations were transmitting, the updates were not getting through. The warheads were flying the terminal approach angles they had been pre-programmed with, angles calculated against the Carl Vinson's position, and heading at the moment of launch, not against its position and heading now. The Carl Vinson had been maneuvering throughout the engagement. Standard evasive sequencing, small course and speed variations made in response to the drone threat geometry. Changes that would have been compensated for automatically if the warheads had been receiving real-time corrections. Changes that compounded into a significant positional offset over 4 minutes of terminal flight time against missiles receiving no updates at all. The SM-6 intercept sequence ran from 9:33 to 9:36. 2 missiles destroyed in the first salvo, 2 more in the second. The 5th SM-6 found its target. The 6th missed as its assigned contact executed a pre-programmed terminal jink that the fire control solution had not fully anticipated. 3 warheads remaining. 2 more interceptors launched. 2 more contacts destroyed. 1 warhead left. The magazine on USS Winston Churchill registered 4%. 1 SM-6 remaining. 1 contact inbound. The last interceptor launched at 9:35 and 52 seconds. It found the target. Debris. The CIWS mount on the Carl Vinson's starboard sponson acquired the final Khorramshahr contact at 1.6 nautical miles. Ballistic terminal phase. Near vertical descent angle. The hardest possible geometry for a close-in weapon system built around sea-skimming threat profiles. It fired anyway. The burst reached the intercept point as the warhead executed its final pre-programmed correction maneuver. A correction derived from a targeting solution that was 4 minutes and 59 seconds stale against a carrier that was not where the targeting solution said it would be. The warhead impacted the Gulf of Oman 210 meters off the Carl Vinson's port bow at 9:36. The detonation of a Khorramshahr warhead in open water at that range is not a minor event. The water column reached beyond 300 feet. The pressure wave struck the Carl Vinson's hull with sufficient force to knock personnel off their feet across multiple decks. Equipment separated from mounts in 7 compartments. 3 sailors were treated for injuries from impact with bulkheads and equipment. The flight deck registered measurable flex, 210 meters. The hull was not touched. In the minutes that followed, the last drone contacts were cleared from the tactical display. 194 Shahad drones launched. 194 destroyed, 8 Khorramshahr ballistic missiles fired, 7 intercepted. 1 deflected by 4 minutes and 59 seconds of unilateral jamming that had prevented every single terminal guidance correction from reaching any of the 8 warheads. throughout their entire terminal descent. Iran had built this attack over weeks. They had calculated the magazine math correctly. The escort destroyers were at effectively zero when the final contact was deflected. They had not calculated for an electronic warfare officer who identified the concealed missile formation from its radar shadow geometry 31 seconds into the drone engagement, and began jamming the correction frequency before the missiles appeared on anyone else's display. Kessler's passive collection throughout the engagement had also fixed every asset Iran had revealed by launching, every drone launch position along the Makran coast and the approaches to Bandar Abbas, every ballistic missile launch coordinate in the Zagros foothills, every ground station that had attempted to push correction data to the warheads during terminal descent, every coastal radar installation that had provided targeting support to the launch sequence. All of it triangulated, packaged, and transmitted to the Strike Coordination Cell by 10:04 that morning. Flight operations on the Carl Vinson resumed at 12:47. Damage control assessments were complete by 11:30. The ship was fully operational before the afternoon watch. The strike list had grown by 22 targets. Everything Iran had exposed by breaking the ceasefire they had signed 48 hours earlier. Iran had spent 37 days being systematically dismantled, agreed to terms they had no intention of honoring, used the pause to prepare one final attack with their last remaining reserve capabilities, and launched it on a Tuesday morning against a formation that had been managing this exact threat architecture long enough to see through it. They revealed everything they had left. By 10:04 that morning, it was all on a targeting list. The ceasefire Iran violated lasted 48 hours. The response lasted considerably longer. If you enjoyed this video, check out one of our other breakdowns. See you next time.